So continuing on in this video from the previous one, I'm going to show how to use the plot command again, but I'm going to exercise a bit more control over the appearance of the graph. So I'm going to be using some additional commands that you can use to augment the graph in order to make it appear just how you want it. So I'm using the same data as before, the European debt to GDP ratio figures, and I'm going to plot the same graph as I did in the previous video, showing the data for UK, Germany, France, Italy and the USA on a single graph. But this time I'm going to do it in slightly more stages so I can exercise a bit more control over the final appearance. So I'm beginning here with the plot command, and this time I'm simply plotting the UK data to start with. So notice how I'm accessing that. I'm using the standard matrix style, but notice rather than simply putting the column number here, you can actually, if your data frame, your matrix time series as it's called here, has variable names, you can use that as well. So this is accessing that column. Here's my title, the labels for the axes, the limits, the axis scale for the y-axis, which I did previously. Just one colour here, of course, just for the one variable. Now here I'm actually going to specify the line width. Previously I just allowed that to be the default of 1. Now I'm going to make it 2. But here's actually something new. This time I'm going to suppress the x-axis so they can add one of my own. To do that, use this command here, xaxt equals n. That tells it to not print an x-axis, because I'm going to use the axis command here to specify that myself. So let me run that command first, and we get the basic graph showing the UK data with the axis labels and so on, but as you can see, no x-axis. So now I can specify that myself using the axis command. The reason for doing this is this enables you to exercise more control over the appearance of the axis, which I want. So it's axis, and then a 1, which tells it to print an x-axis. You then tell it the scale, the sequence of values you want on the axis, using the at parameter here, at equals, and a quick way to tell it to plot from 2006 to 2015 with gaps of 1 is simply use this sequence notation here. So you can see that's going to plot an axis from 2016 to 2015, and it will have gaps of 1. In other words, it will be 2006, 2007 and so on. Finally, and I'm telling it to change the size of the axis labels, the axis tick marks, these dates in other words, to 0.8 of the standard size. So obviously if you don't include that, it will print them at the standard default size. You can change that either below, I'm making it smaller here, 80%. Obviously if you put a figure bigger than 1, it would make it higher. That's useful, of course, because often you find that when you print at the x-axis, if the font size is too big, then they're scrunched up, so you can reduce it, or if they're too small, you can increase it using this option. So if I run that, there you can see it's printed those labels according to what I specified. And if you notice, they are slightly smaller than the standard size here because of that 0.8. Okay, now how do I add the additional variables to the graph? Well, the standard, the command that you use to add additional data, additional series to be plotted on your graph is the lines command. Here it is. So basically it operates the same as the plot. It has that command, it has the same sorts of arguments, but by using lines, it means that it will add that line to the current graph, the one you've just plotted. So I'm telling it now to plot Germany, so I'm choosing the Germany column in the same way here. That's the colour I want, that's the line width. So notice it's the same options, but you're using lines. So that will plot Germany. I can then plot France, and notice because I'm now using the lines command and plotting these things one by one, I can change the actual line width here, or the style, if I want. So this enables me to emphasize certain variables, certain lines on the graph. That's the advantage of doing it in stages using the lines command here. So let me on that. So that will plot France, but notice with a line width of 4. Now for Italy, and then finally USA. And again, I've taken advantage of the fact that I'm plotting this separately to change the style here using the LTY option. 3 means plot dotted. The default is 1 of solid, of course, which you normally don't need to specify if you want the default, but here I'm changing it to a dotted. You'll find what the different numbers mean if you look in the help system. And as you can see, that's plotted that in green, dark green, but with dotted lines. So that enables me to exercise a bit more control over the appearance of these lines, to emphasize a couple of them, one in by a greater line width, one by dotted. So that's the advantage of doing it in this way. Now the other additional command, the augmenting command that I want to look at, is grid here, which will enable me to add grids. Now if you want to add both a horizontal and a vertical grid, you put nx equals null, and then I can specify the line width. And as you can see, that's added some grids, lines. Again, if you want to know more about that command, simply look it up in the help system. So we're almost there now. The only thing, of course, I need is a legend. Well, we saw how to do that up here in the previous video. So I'm using the same thing, bottom right, specifying the names, of course, which must be in the order that I put them on the graph. I'm making it the lines 3. The colours, of course, again must match the order in which you put them in here. But the main difference here, of course, is that I now need to specify the different styles of these lines that I put on here using the LTY option. So I'm now making that equal to a vector rather than just a single value, and these values here indicate the style of each line. So 1 means solid, so obviously I want solid for the first 4, but I had dotted for the final one, USA, so as you can see 1, 1, 1, 1, and then a 3. So that will make the lines in the legend match the lines on here. So if I enter that, as you can see, that works very nicely. So you can see that by, and of course I can export this now if I want to a PNG or a PDF file. By exercising a little bit more control here, doing it in stages, you can make the graph appear even more as you want it. Now, of course, this may seem a lot more work than just doing it in a couple of lines, but remember, of course, that because you're using code here and this file gets saved, this, of course, can simply be, once you've set up a basic way of creating a graph that you like, you can simply, of course, copy and paste this set of code, these lines of code, into your new R script file that you're working on, and simply, of course, just modify the various features, the title and so on, as appropriate. Okay, so that shows you how to use the plot command with a bit more control.